Mel nudges the goldfish bowl off the sill and watches it smash 12 floors below. This is an act of mercy. Better the fish die fast in the open air. From one of 100 windows, someone shouts. Laid out below, London glitters like an endless plain of broken glass, ready to cut the unwary to ribbons. She closes her eyes against the unrelenting shimmer and tastes the wind instead. Exhaust fumes, blocked drains, and a smoky deep-fat fryer. Tomorrow is only the 1st of May, but spring is already ceding to summer. The air holds the heat of several sunny days. Chris hammered at the door twice today. Soon he'll be back with friends, ready to batter it off the hinges. When Mel needed a loan to pay for the funeral, Chris was the only one who'd still give her credit. He likes to think he's a businessman, but he takes too much pleasure in enforcement. He likes to exert leverage. Mel was never going to meet the repayment deadline, and he probably knew it. All this for a cardboard coffin and 5 minutes in the furnace. She swallows hard. Her father deserved better. Last night she crept into the dogshit park outside their block, opened the urn and tipped out his ashes. Most got lost in the scrappy grass or blew back along the path, but some rose as dust to the too light sky. He didn't love this city or this flat, but where else could she scatter him? Mel hopes he's been whipped up into the troposphere, that he'll end up blowing across blue Arctic tundra. She closes the window and turns into the apartment. The place is bare, apart from the bike and the rucksack next to the double-bolted door. Now everything is set. Chris doesn't expect her to cut and run. That will come as a surprise. After 26 years lived in this block, she can hardly believe it either. Strange to think that a debt collector is the only person who'll notice her gone. The lift has been broken for years, so Mel must carry her bike down a dozen flights of stairs. There are cameras here, just as there are cameras on every street corner. But she isn't worried. The police don't watch them, or if they do, they never respond. Pushing open the swing door to the block, she drags her bike through. In the middle of the park there is a sofa, now occupied by 4 or 5 boys. The nearby streetlights are all smashed, and it is too dark to see the boys' faces, but they're bound to know Chris. Heart pounding, she ducks around the building and onto a parallel street. The binmen no longer service this borough, so each house has a pile of rubbish sacks outside. Some rupture onto the tarmac, and Mel must dodge between cartons, cans, and plastic bottles. A fox picks at the scraps, punctuating the night with a harsh scream once she has passed. The bike is conspicuous, and she has no way to disguise it, but it is unlikely that anyone will call the authorities. Few people here venture out after midnight, and those who do have a disregard for the law. At the edge of the residential zone, the pavement ends by a bus stop. There is no way to proceed on foot because she is supposed to use public transport. That way, the police can enforce travel liberties, restrictions linked to your identity. They claim these measures will reduce crime, but they only care about protecting rich neighbourhoods. Wealth in London is structured in concentric rings, fading out into the countryside. Mel's borough is nothing more than a preemptive prison. She tips off the pavement and onto the North Circular, riding without lights while buses and HGVs smash past her, their horns jamming. It's only 5 minutes to the bridge, but her lungs burn with sucked exhaust fumes. She glances over her shoulder, checking she has time before the next vehicle, then jams on her brakes and presses back into the railings. A lorry sweeps past in a barrage of headlights and dust, inches from her face. The canal path is 5 meters below, with a lamppost extending to the level of the bridge. She lifts her bike over the railings and slings it towards the bushes, then wraps her legs around the post and slides down. Above her head, another lorry rumbles past. Retrieving her bike, she pulls twigs from the spokes and spins the pedals twice. There is no public access to this canal, so it is mainly used for fly tipping. The air is stagnant, and she can hear rats scuttling along the towpath. A bill posted to the lamppost details planning permission for new riverfront flats, as though anyone could see it here. Mel is getting out just in time. Soon all the footpaths out of London will be built over. Steeling herself, she swings into the saddle. What awaits in the north is unknown, but it cannot be worse than this. Since leaving the suburbs last night, Mel hasn't heard any man-made noises apart from the perimeter alarm of a country house and the occasional ticking of power cables overhead. Navigating by black market maps, dog-eared photocopies of photocopies held together with tape, she has taken the smallest lanes, the most overgrown tracks, sleeping in the porch of a derelict church during yesterday's daylight hours. She cannot get used to the silence of the countryside. It presses on her ears like water, making her feel vulnerable and unbalanced. Nevertheless, Mel panics when she hears the purr of an engine. Her years as a cycle courier have tuned her ears to the varying frequencies. This car is lying in wait, she can tell. It is probably the police, enforcing the new freedom from trespass laws. Knowing there will be floodlights waiting round the next corner, she swerves her bike from the road. In the rough terrain of Thetford Forest, she must get off and push. Her feet sink in the mulch of pine needles. Her loud breath seems to tear the night. The trees here are planted in grid formation, grown for timber, so she's always at the centre of a crosshair, only able to see down 4 narrow avenues. Keeping back among the trunks, Mel eyes the blockade as she pads past. It's too dark to look for danger in any other direction, so she doesn't try. The police have got sloppy. They are listening to the radio, smooth hits leaking from their armoured car. A branch cracks beneath her foot and she freezes. No need. The sound is smothered by pop melody. Trudging on through sand, leaf litter and dirt, Mel reaches the forest's northeastern edge at dawn. Amber light flares on the rust-tipped grasses, but she cannot afford to admire the scene. Fear is catching in her chest. She needs to find cover on this flat land before the wide sky lets in too much sun. This forest is rumoured to shelter exiles, bandits even. She can't rest here. Her rucksack feels as though it's full of stones, but she hitches up the straps and pushes on. Mel keeps low behind boundary hedges. The stunted Scots pines stoop down to meet her. Off the tarmac road, her bike is nothing but a hindrance. She must lift it over ditches and shove it through scrub. Her hip bone is already bruised from hitching the steel frame. She had thought her clothes practical, but they are made for city living. Now her t-shirt is torn and her trainers are sodden, one sole flapping loose. Blisters are swelling on both big toes. She is almost at the point of dropping onto the damp ground when she sees a farm in the distance. It should be uninhabited given this whole swathe of countryside has been cleared. Aching for sleep, Mel picks up pace and skirts around the field. There is no taint of manure in the air, just the dank smell of disuse. With the nervous stalk of a feral cat, she peers into the first barn. It is empty apart from a few rough-bound bales and a wood pigeon cooing in the loft. The floor is still intact, and the roof is still intact, and the floor is dry. This is all she needs. Dumping her bike in the corner, she crumples onto the thin straw and falls asleep. When Mel awakes, it is to the sound of running water. Just meters away, an old man in a wax jacket is pissing unsteadily. He is short in stature, his white hair thinning on top. When he turns and sees her, he staggers and almost falls onto the dampened bales. She should be running, but she isn't. He should be reaching for a scythe or a pitchfork, but he isn't. Recovering his balance, the man scrutinizes her with an amused expression. "And who might you be?" he asks. "Look," she says, "I'll leave. You don't need to call the police. I'll leave." The man sucks in his ruddy cheeks. "Well, I'm Bill," he says, "and from the sound of you, you've escaped from our fine capital." "No," Mel protests, "Oh, don't worry," he says. "I'm not about to shop you in. The news channels might tell me that London is the greatest and safest city in the world, but I'm too old to buy that. I imagine there are plenty of reasons to flee. If you coop people up like chickens, They'll peck the feathers from each other's backs. When she still does not reply, Bill chuckles to himself. You cycled then? He asks, gesturing to where she has flung down her bike in the straw. I thought they'd been confiscated. The Department for Transport impounded all privately owned bicycles 3 years ago, citing safety concerns. Thanks to an earlier police registration scheme, they knew exactly which doors to knock on. People can still use docked bikes now, but only on authorised routes. Deviate and the mechanism disables. I built it from spare parts. Mel shrugs, pride entering her voice. It wasn't hard. He nods. I think I'd have left it sooner if I were you.
Well, thank you, Ellie Matthews. That was wonderful. And I'm Jenna Binge. I'm here with Ellie, and I'm the president of the Kerouac Project of Orlando. And Ellie has been with us for 3 months. So
yeah, it's been a pleasure.
It's gone fast, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So that was a wonderful reading. Can you tell us a little bit about where it's from?
So this is from the manuscript of my first novel, which is a dystopia set in the UK. Kind of the basic premise being that the North and South have divided and become separate states with a conflict brewing between them.
Oh, so it's sort of pre-Brexit, is it?
Yeah, pre-Brexit.
It might be a little closer to it.
Yeah. I'm not really hoping that it comes true, but...
So can you tell us a little bit about what kind of writing you had been doing and what kind of training you had?
So, I mean, I've always written for myself, but I started doing it seriously as a kind of, not a full-time endeavour, but an endeavour that I focused several days of the week on, but about 4 years ago now. I was working full-time as a writer and editor. I was the international writer for the Red Cross, but I knew that I wanted to do creative writing, so unfortunately I had to leave that job, and I got a part-time job so that I could spend half of my week writing, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
Wow. And Have you done any formal training to write?
No.
Wow.
I did an English degree, but that was there was no writing element of that. That was just reading and kind of academic side of it. Yeah.
Wow. So have you had a lot of contact with other writers, or?
Certainly not in the first few years. I was lucky enough last year to be selected for a kind of Penguin Insight Day, and that was a great opportunity to meet some other writers.
I think you better explain that, because in the US we might think that it was you and the Penguins.
Yeah, okay. So Penguin is a publisher in the UK, and they do kind of programs, or they do this program called Right Now, which helps people have access to them and to advice on how to get an agent, how to get published. It's just sort of a one-day event, but that was kind of, for me, that was the first real contact with the professional side of writing, I suppose, because before that it was just me in my house mainly. So that was really exciting, and then of course coming here has been the kind of feels like this next step of this amazing opportunity to meet all these other writers and kind of be part of a literary community. And it's something I've tried to take seriously by myself, but to be among lots of other people who take it really seriously is kind of this huge boost. Yeah.
So how did you hear about the Kerouac Project?
Online. I can't remember the exact website, but it was something that I noticed several times, I think, kind of looking at listings of residencies. This is actually my first residency.
Your first application?
My first application, which I realise is extremely lucky. But that wasn't sort of just that I randomly decided to apply here. It was that this was the one that really stood out to me as this kind of amazing chunk of time. And because as I've said, I'm used to working kind of by myself, and I'm used to kind of that discipline. It really appealed to me, the idea of the time and the kind of space to write. Obviously it's the the aspects of it that I didn't anticipate, the kind of community here, have been enriching in ways I didn't anticipate. But that was what kind of initially drew me.
You could be a hermit here in Orlando.
Exactly.
Wow, so you just went ahead and applied.
Yeah, pretty much.
And how did you find the application process?
It was really smooth, and and prior to arrival and everything, Jeff was so helpful, and so was Karen and lots of people associated with the project. It just really kind of made sure that I had all the information I needed, so that even kind of coming from overseas, didn't feel like a big scary thing. It felt very easy, which was lucky.
And was Orlando the Orlando you were expecting?
No.
Really?
No. As you know, I feel like this is probably something you get a lot, but I had no idea of the kind of the cultural art scene here, the literary scene, and that was such a welcome surprise. And as I say, I kind of expected it to be this slightly isolated experience, but kind of in a sort of Spartan way, something that I do and it'd be good for me, but it's but it's been so much
just
fun.
Knuckle down and write.
Exactly. But it's actually just been so much fun as well, and I've met so many lovely people that I really hope I'll stay in contact with. And also I kind of didn't realize quite how wild Florida is, and even as a city, Orlando has this just nature everywhere. So this might not be as exciting maybe if you're from Florida or from the US and you've been to Florida before, but for me that was really exceptional. It's just, I spent the first 2 weeks after I'd done my day of writing cycling around for 2 hours when it was cool enough to, just before sunset, just looking at the trees and the plants, and there's all these things that you only see as tiny house plants in the UK that are 5 foot tall.
They're rubber
in
plants.
someone's front garden. So that aspect of it was very exciting as well. And Disney hasn't really factored in at all.
It's down that end.
Which is, for me, is.
And you had a couple of wild animal encounters, didn't you?
Yes.
More so than most of our residents. Perhaps it's because you spent 2 hours a day seeking it out.
I was lucky enough, my partner came up to visit, and we sort of went and saw some of the other parts of Florida. So we went to the Everglades. There's a place called Shark Valley where you can cycle through the Everglades, and there's kind of alligators sat on the sides of the cycle path, and sometimes walking across it. I have a very good video of me backing away on my bicycle from an alligator, but at a safe distance. And I was also lucky enough that I was paddling in Sebastian Inlet, I think it's called, and there was a manatee right there, and I obviously didn't approach it because that's not what you're supposed to do, but it sort of was swimming around, rolling into me, and then at some point it kind of turned and brushed me with its tail, and I sort of backed away, going,
I can't touch you,
don't touch me. But that was very exciting. I hadn't actually realized it was there. I paddled out to look at, there was a dolphin swimming in the channel, and then the fisherman said, there's a manatee right in front of you, which was,
You're like, well, now I do.
Now I do. It sort of surfaced with its bristly nose, and
very slow, deliberate.
Yeah.
So thinking about the writing, a lot of people like to know what kind of a routine you set up in the house, and were you able to stick with it, or how did that work for you?
I found, I set up quite a rigorous routine, partly because the season I was here was quite hot, so to not go mad, I needed to make sure I got some daylight. So I would tend to kind of get up around when it got light, sit outside, have my breakfast for a little while, and then it got too hot and I would come inside and do kind of work in 2-hour shifts with tiny breaks in between until more or less the evening. 2 hours before sunset, I'd go and ride around on my bike. And then in the evening I'd read or do some sociable, whichever.
And every resident that comes finds some kind of little social activity group to be in, and I think you'd be the first one to
Yeah, I was lucky enough to meet some wonderful climbers here, I do rock climbing in the UK, and I sort of thought coming to Florida, like, there's no way I'm going to be able to keep this up.
There's no mountains.
You know, there's no mountains. I had a friend in the UK actually look it up for me on the sort of a forum and kind of look up the nearest places you could climb. She said, oh yes, it's about 500 miles away or something. So I'd given up on that idea, and then I did realise that there was a climbing wall, so I posted on some forum kind of thinking, ooh, is this a dodgy thing to do? But some people in College Park offered to take me to the climbing wall, and now they're really good friends of mine, and they're going to come to the UK and visit.
Oh,
and so yeah, they've just
there.
really enriched my experience. And part of me feels like when you're in the house, you sort of think, oh my goodness, I should be writing 24 hours a day, but I can't do that. And I like to have balance, because I think that enables me to then get up the next day and write again. Whereas if I do the thing of being quite masochistic and just being like, I must write all day, every day, you burn it yourself out. So
right, and also you're not in your home place, so there's very little cooking. You're alone, very little cooking, very little housework.
Yeah.
No social calls that you don't instigate.
Yeah.
The lady next door isn't coming over for an hour gossip or anything.
Exactly.
So it's different.
Yeah.
So you read from that. What have you been writing while you've been here?
So I've been writing a new novel. I'm about 2/3 of the way through a first draft, which for me is a lot. I know everyone writes at different paces, and we live under the shadow of Jack's 12-day novel. But it's not my speed is not my forte. But I feel happy with the draft, and I feel like it's something it's not obviously finished at all, but it's something that I could share with people, which is really exciting.
Is it dystopian as well?
No, not really. It's kind of got similar themes in terms of aspects of class politics and kind of that sort of thing, but it's set in the present.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, do you have any advice for anyone who is watching this and might be wanting to apply?
Do it. It's a really wonderful experience. Even if you just want to write, it's perfect. But if you want like a really rounded experience with kind of people who are warm and are going to help you along as a starting out writer, it has all those things. So.
Well, that's very sweet. Yeah. Well, we have absolutely loved having you, and you've enriched our environment. We have 3 goals here in the house. The first one is to preserve this as a historic home. The second one is to find 4 writers such as you and bring them in for 3 months apiece. And then the third goal is to use the writers that we bring in to enrich our local writing literary community. And you've really done that. And we're going to miss you.
Oh, I'm going to miss Orlando.
I know. This is not a good thing.
I know.
We wish you well, and when you have a novel published, we would love you to come back and do a book signing here.
Oh my goodness.
Please
I would love
do.
that.
Yeah. Well, all the best to you, Ellie.
Thank you so much.